If you agree that real heroes don't brag about what they've done, they just quietly keep serving, make sure to like and subscribe. Because what I'm about to tell you proves that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who carried the world on their shoulders. They said she was just a caterer, just a young woman carrying trays of shrimp cocktails and champagne flutes across a wedding hall. But when the Admiral saw her, his glass stopped mid-air, and the color drained from his face. He didn't see a server. He saw Commander Maya Onyx, the ghost of a mission no one ever forgot. But before that shocking moment, before a ballroom full of people fell silent, Maya was simply trying to rebuild a life that no longer had a battlefield. She was 28, too young, some thought, to have such old eyes. The kind of eyes that scanned a room automatically, noting exits, evaluating threats, anticipating chaos, even in the calm hum of a wedding reception. She wore her catering uniform pressed and neat, hair tied back with precision that made her coworkers joke she was way too formal for finger food. She smiled softly, but no one knew that it wasn't formality, it was discipline, the kind that had been trained into her bones years earlier, before she traded her uniform for an apron. That evening, the hotel ballroom shimmered with fairy lights, laughter, and clinking glasses. The groom's father was a retired Navy Admiral, though she didn't know that when she took the job. She only knew the venue needed extra hands, and she needed the paycheck. She moved through the tables with quiet grace, setting napkins just so, checking every plate as if her life depended on symmetry. Her coworkers teased her for caring too much. "Maya, relax," one of them laughed. "You're not feeding a fleet." She just smiled and said, "Discipline feeds everyone, one way or another." The girl laughed, but Maya's mind had already drifted, back to nights on a different kind of deck, salt spray in her hair, and the endless hum of engines beneath her boots. She could still hear the sound of coded transmissions, still feel the burn of command in her voice, still remember the day everything went wrong. But those memories were sealed away now, tucked behind the same kind of tight-lipped professionalism she brought to this catering job. The reception was beautiful. The bride glowed, the groom looked proud, and the Admiral laughed among his friends, a man at peace. Maya stayed in the background, blending into the soft blur of service. Every now and then, she'd feel the Admiral's gaze brush past her, but she didn't think much of it. To him, she was just another face among dozens. Or so she thought. When the band started playing, she carried a tray of appetizers past the head table, nodding politely as guests reached for canapes. The Admiral's voice carried over the music as he prepared for his toast. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today I don't just gain a daughter. I witness a new chapter in our family's story." His words were proud, steady, practiced. But halfway through, he froze. His gaze locked on Maya. She didn't notice at first. She was focused on steadying her tray, making sure the silverware gleamed. Then she felt it, the weight of his stare. She looked up, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. It was like a spark through time. Recognition. Disbelief. The tremor of something buried too deep to name. The Admiral's hand shook. The microphone buzzed faintly as he lowered it. And then, his voice, lower, almost breaking, cut through the room. "Commander Onyx, report to High Command." The entire hall fell silent. Maya's tray wobbled slightly, a single flute tipping before she steadied it. The words echoed, bouncing off crystal and marble, confusing every guest in the room. Someone whispered, "Did he just say Commander?" Cameras turned. The groom blinked, unsure if this was a joke. Maya's throat tightened. For years, she buried that name, locked it away like the medals, in her old duffel bag. But hearing it now, spoken with such reverence, made her chest ache. Slowly, she set the tray down, straightened her posture, and walked toward the Admiral. Every step was deliberate, her back straight, shoulders squared, like muscle memory had taken over. The Admiral's eyes were wet, his face pale. "Ma'am," he whispered, voice breaking with emotion. "I thought you—" He couldn't finish. She gave a small, controlled nod. "It's been a long time, Admiral Trent." The groom turned sharply. "Dad, what's going on?" The Admiral didn't look at him. He saluted, an old, sharp motion that silenced the murmuring crowd. And then he said words that would ripple far beyond that ballroom. "This woman saved your life." Gasps filled the room. Phones came out. Guests whispered. The bride covered her mouth. The Admiral went on, explaining how, during a covert naval rescue in the South China Sea, a then commander named Onyx led a classified extraction team after a downed aircraft. One of the rescued was his son, now the groom, injured and barely conscious. The mission was buried in silence. The officers were dispersed afterward. He hadn't seen her since. Maya tried to interject, to quiet him, but the Admiral shook his head. The world should know who you are. She didn't want the spotlight. She wanted to disappear. Sir, she said softly, I'm just doing my job. But her voice trembled. Not from fear, from the flood of memories she'd kept locked away for too long. Every face she'd lost. Every order she'd given. Every moment of quiet that followed chaos. Around her, the music had stopped. The guests were standing, unsure whether to applaud or bow. The groom's eyes filled with tears. He stepped toward her, voice shaking. It was you, he whispered. You pulled me out of that wreckage. Maya didn't answer. She simply nodded once, eyes glassy but firm. It's good to see you standing, sir. Then, as quickly as it had begun, she turned, picking her tray back up and disappearing into the kitchen, leaving behind a ballroom full of stunned silence and the echo of a name. Commander Onyx ***, that no one would forget again. And out there, under the chandelier's glow, the Admiral stood frozen, realizing that sometimes the greatest soldiers hide not out of shame, but out of humility. He raised his glass to the crowd and said softly, to those who still serve, even when no one's watching. But Maya didn't hear it. She was already back in the kitchen, hands trembling as she washed the dishes, the past crashing over her like a wave. She had kept her promise, to stay quiet, to live simply. But tonight, fate had other plans. And for the first time in years, as she looked at her reflection in the stainless steel sink, she saw not a caterer, but a commander who had simply been waiting for her next call to serve. The Admiral's words lingered long after the music stopped. The ballroom felt frozen, the weight of revelation pressing against every crystal and whispering guest. Maya could hear the muffled buzz of confusion outside the kitchen door. People wondering if it was staged, if the Admiral had been mistaken, if the quiet young caterer they'd ignored all night was really the same commander who'd once led a classified rescue. She leaned against the counter, staring at her reflection in a tray slick with soap. Her heartbeat was steady, but her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the strange collision of two worlds she'd fought to keep apart. When the door swung open, one of her co-workers stepped in, eyes wide. Maya, everyone's talking about you. The Admiral's looking for you. He's serious, isn't he? You were really in the Navy. Maya dried her hands on a towel, her movements sharp, precise. I was, she said quietly. A long time ago. But that wasn't true, not really. The Navy never left her. It lived in her posture, in the way she scanned every exit, in how she could predict a problem before it began. It lived in her silence. When she finally stepped back into the ballroom, the Admiral was waiting by the head table, his uniform jacket buttoned again, his eyes wet with pride and guilt. Commander Onyx, he said softly, the title fitting her like a name she'd never truly shed. I need to apologize. I didn't mean to expose you. But seeing you here, he paused, struggling for words. You vanished after that mission. They told us you resigned without honors. I knew that couldn't be right. Maya looked down at her shoes, the polished catering flats that suddenly felt foreign on her feet. It was right, Admiral. I made a choice. His brow furrowed. You saved my son. You saved 6 men that night. You lost 3. That wasn't failure. Her voice cracked, just a little. Tell that to the families of the ones who didn't make it. The Admiral sighed, lowering his tone. We all live with ghosts, Commander. But the Navy needs leaders who remember what those ghosts mean. High Command's been trying to reach you for months. There's a humanitarian op in the Pacific, storm response, logistics crisis. They asked me if I knew how to contact you. I didn't until tonight. He handed her a small envelope. The seal was unmistakable, the insignia of the same department she'd sworn she'd never return to. Maya took it with trembling fingers, eyes scanning the letters, the language cold but familiar. Her pulse quickened. Why me? She asked quietly. Because, the Admiral said, there are missions that need heart as much as strategy, and you've always had both. Before she could respond, the groom and his bride approached, still in shock. The groom's voice was small but sincere. I didn't know, he said. "I never saw your face that night. I just remember being dragged through the mud, the sound of gunfire, and someone shouting orders. You told me to keep breathing." He swallowed hard. "You told me to hold on." Maya gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "And you did." The bride wiped her tears. "You saved our family before we even existed." Maya nodded, words failing her. The room had softened now. The awe had turned to reverence. Guests approached quietly, offering thanks they didn't fully understand. Some shook her hand, others simply nodded. But Maya didn't linger in the attention. She slipped out to the terrace for air. The ocean breeze hit her like a memory, salt, wind, and the ghostly rhythm of distant waves that sounded too much like the hum of ship engines. She thought about the years she'd spent trying to live small, folding napkins instead of mission briefs, carrying trays instead of tactical maths. It had been peaceful, yes, but hollow. She realized then that she hadn't been hiding out of shame. She'd been hiding from purpose. And maybe purpose, like the tide, always found a way to pull you back. The Admiral joined her after a moment, his silhouette framed by the ballroom lights. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said gently. "But I think you already know what your answer is." Maya took a deep breath. "I promised myself I'd never lead again, that I'd stop before I lost more people." He nodded. "You didn't lose them, Maya. You carried them, and you still do." She turned to face him, eyes glassy but strong. "If I come back, I do it on my terms. No medals, no cameras, just the mission." The Admiral smiled faintly. "The Navy will take what it can get." Inside, the reception had resumed in cautious fragments, laughter that didn't quite reach full volume, a band trying to play through the weight of revelation. Maya lingered by the glass doors, watching life move on around her. The bride and groom danced beneath the lights, unknowing that their happiness was built on the courage of a woman who had saved them long before she ever served them dessert. As the night drew to a close, she packed up quietly, tucking the sealed envelope into her pocket. She told her team she'd close up, waving them off with a faint smile. Alone in the kitchen, she looked once more at the sink, the polished trays, the lingering scent of wedding cake, symbols of the quiet life she'd built to forget. Then she whispered to herself, once a commander, her reflection in the metal answered the rest. When she stepped outside, the Admiral was waiting beside a black government sedan, headlights low, engine running. The sea wind tugged at her apron. She hesitated for one last moment, looking back at the glowing ballroom, the laughter, the light, the normalcy she'd tried to find. Then she walked toward the car, folded her apron neatly, and slid into the back seat. The Admiral gave a small nod, nothing more. No words were needed. As the car pulled away, Maya Onyx looked out toward the ocean, her expression calm but resolute. The world would never stop needing people like her. And though she'd spent years pretending to be just a caterer, fate had reminded her tonight that she was built for command, no matter how far she tried to run from it. Dawn crept over the horizon in pale gold ribbons as the car rolled through the quiet coastal highway, the ocean glinting beside them like molten glass. Maya hadn't spoken since they left the reception, her mind replaying every second of the night. The Admiral's voice, the stunned silence, the way her name had filled that ballroom like a secret finally unearthed. Commander Onyx. She had tried to bury that name, tried to live a life small enough to forget the sound of orders echoing through metal corridors, the smell of jet fuel and sea salt, the weight of command pressing down like gravity. But some parts of you don't fade, they just wait. As the first light touched her face, she finally said, "I thought I'd outrun all of it. The missions, the guilt, the responsibility." The Admiral nodded from the front seat. "You didn't outrun it, Maya. You just rested. There's a difference." The car stopped outside a naval base that looked smaller than she remembered, though maybe it was her that had changed, 28 now, older in spirit than most officers twice her age. When she stepped out, the gate guard straightened instinctively, though she wore only her catering clothes. The Admiral showed his ID, gave her one last glance that was equal parts pride and apology, and said, "Command will brief you. They'll explain everything." She watched him leave, the car fading into the sunrise, and for a moment, she felt suspended between two lives, one made of service, the other of silence. Inside, the base smelled of coffee, salt, and memory. She sat across from a younger officer who looked barely 20, nervously handing her a folder marked confidential. Humanitarian logistics, Pacific sector, storm damage, displaced civilians, fractured infrastructure. Nothing like the covert extractions she once led, but it still required precision, courage, and calm under chaos. The kind of mission where compassion was strategy. Hours later, when she finally walked out with new orders in hand, she paused by the flagpole outside the base. The wind caught her hair as she looked up at the stars and stripes rippling overhead. Her reflection in the window behind it was faint, but she saw it clearly. Not the weary caterer, not the hidden veteran, but the commander she had always been. Her phone buzzed, a message from one of the caterers she'd worked with the night before. Asterisk, Maya, the whole internet's talking about you. The Admiral's speech went viral. People are calling you the quiet commander. Are you okay? Asterisk, she smiled faintly, typing back. Asterisk, I'm exactly where I need to be. Asterisk. That afternoon, as she boarded the transport vessel, the hum of the engines felt like coming home. A young crewman greeted her nervously. Ma'am, sorry, Commander, welcome aboard. She nodded once, taking in the familiar rhythm of discipline and purpose. Around her, sailors moved with quiet focus, some too young to know her name, others whispering it in awe. She gave no speech, no declaration, just rolled up her sleeves and began working through the logistics files, directing crews with calm authority. To her, leadership wasn't about rank or recognition. It was about doing what had to be done when no one else could. As the ship cut through the water, she thought about that wedding. The joy, the laughter, the way people had looked at her when they learned who she really was. Not with fear or disbelief, but with gratitude. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of hiding. She felt peace. That night, she stood alone on the deck, the horizon stretching endlessly ahead. The sky was the same shade of blue as it had been the day she'd first taken her oath. She whispered softly into the wind, as if speaking to ghosts carried across the waves. You can rest now. I'm still here. Back in town, the stories continued to spread. The Admiral's toast, the mysterious commander turned caterer, the viral video of her quiet salute. But Maya never saw it. She had left her phone behind on the shore, tucked into the pocket of her folded apron, the last remnant of the life she'd tried to build away from duty. Somewhere out there, she imagined, people would debate whether it was real, whether the humble young woman serving canapes could really have been a war hero. But she didn't need their validation. The sea knew, the Admiral knew, the men she'd saved knew, and that was enough. Weeks later, a letter arrived at the Admiral's home, simple, handwritten, and signed. Inside was a photo, a group of children on an island runway, smiling as aid planes landed behind them, holding up a hand-painted banner that read, asterisk, thank you, Commander Onyx. Asterisk beneath it, in small print, she had written, mission complete. The Admiral folded the letter gently, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes. Because sometimes, heroes don't wear medals or stand on stages. They wear aprons or carry trays or vanish into the rhythm of ordinary life until the world needs them again. And when it does, they rise, steady, unspoken, unstoppable. Somewhere over the Pacific, Commander Maya Onyx stood at the helm of her team, the hum of the engines steady beneath her boots, her gaze locked on the horizon. The woman the world mistook for a caterer was, once again, exactly who she was meant to be. And though she might never crave recognition, the universe had found its way to salute her, in silence, in sunrise, in the endless call of the sea.